Hello and welcome. I'm Gerald Rector, CEO here at Vic Health, and it brings me great pleasure to join you today to share the story of generating equality and respect, a world-first model for the primary prevention of violence against women. But before we begin proceedings, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm delighted to share this new contribution to Victoria's efforts to end violence against women, a place-based approach delivered in partnership with Monash City Council and Link Health and Community. Vic Health is proud to have led the prevention of violence against women in Victoria for well over 10 years, working closely with many of you logged into this session today and marking Victoria as a national leader in primary prevention. Generating equality and respect is an important addition to this work and points to a new direction for primary prevention activity. And I'm confident that the learnings from this investment will help take prevention to the next level. Today's webinar was developed by the Generating Equality and Respect project team with fellow practitioners and project teams in mind, and we've got people tuning in from far and wide, from around Victoria and other states of Australia, the UK and even as far as the Netherlands. You'll see on your screens a Q&A box. So as you're watching the speakers today, please send through any questions you may have at any time, and we will pass them on to be answered in a live Q&A session at the conclusion of the presentations. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Tessa Piper, Vic Health's Senior Project Officer for the Generating Equality and Respect program.
Let's go back for a moment to 2012. The Australian Bureau of Statistics Personal Safety Survey was underway and would show that since the age of 15, 1 in 3 women had experienced physical violence. Where men were more likely to have experienced violence from a stranger than by someone they knew, the reverse was true for women. We would learn that since the age of 15, 1 in 5 women had experienced sexual violence. And we would learn that for the 36% of women who had experienced physical or sexual violence from someone that they knew, it was most likely to have happened in their own homes at the hands of a male current or ex-partner. We knew that rigid views about gender roles and unequal relationships between men and women were key drivers of violence against women, and that prevention efforts needed to focus squarely on reducing inequalities. At Vic Health, 5 years of investment into the Respect, Responsibility and Equality program was coming to a close. This program provided a series of funding opportunities to support the development of Victorian practice in preventing violence against women. Small grants had been provided to 29 organisations to undertake prevention activities over a 12-month period. 5 of these were then scaled up for an additional 3 years. What this allowed us to do was consolidate our findings and understandings about how to build gender equity via the following settings: a corporate workplace, a network of youth practitioners, a maternal and child health service, a local government, and a faith organisation. Each of these projects demonstrated impact in promoting equal and respectful relationships between men and women within the given setting. And this prompted a series of questions. What would happen if we could bring all of these promising programs and pour them into a single, geographically bound site? What benefit could mutually multiple reinforcing messages have within a single location? What would such a site look like? Who could we involve as partners? What structure would we need to do this? And importantly, could such a model be transferred to other places with similar outcomes? By 2012, a blueprint had been developed, outlining a framework for what we now know as the Generating Equality and Respect program. An initial call-out went to organisations willing to work in partnership to plan, implement and evaluate a host of tried and tested programs within a geographically bound area. This was a fresh way of doing prevention in Victoria, and in fact worldwide. By mid-2012, a formal partnership was established between Vic Health, Monash City Council and Link Health and Community. $1 million was provided by Vic Health over 3.5 years. We invested in the design and implementation of a comprehensive research and evaluation framework to sit alongside the program so that we could generate new evidence along the way and find out what does and doesn't work. This investment allowed us to appoint a cross-organisational project team and seed and implement a range of activities over 3 years. This investment allowed us to complement our program with a comprehensive communications and dissemination plan so that we could share our learnings and practice insights. Generating Equality and Respect set out to do a number of things. We wanted to trial a model for site-based prevention via a 3-way partnership. We achieved this. The partnership structure was one of the most important features of the program, and the depth of partnership between the 2 lead organisations remains a huge asset for the Monash community to be leveraged into the future. Although the site's boundaries broadened over the life course of the program, from a single suburb to including some surrounding areas, we were able to trial a site-based model for primary prevention and now have a much deeper understanding of the mechanisms and elements needed to make it work. We wanted to take a considered focused approach to planning via a prevention plan of action. We achieved this. A co-designed prevention plan operationalised program goals into specific pieces of work. Partnerships and activities within the site's different settings were staggered over time, beginning with settings that we deemed most ready for implementation activity to occur. The settings in order of implementation included Monash City Council and Link Health and Community, who were also our lead organisations, a Partners in Prevention network for youth, practitioners and experts, a maternal and child health service, and a predominantly male workplace. We wanted to develop partnerships through a community reference group and engage settings and population groups across the site. We established multiple local partnerships to support individuals, organisations and communities to build gender equity. We engaged settings individually within the site, and we were overseen by an executive committee from the 3 lead organisations. What we didn't do was establish a local community board. We wanted to guide on-the-ground activity with the programs and activities that we'd tested over the past 5 years. We did this, supporting a significant number of people and organisations within the site to promote and practice gender equality and respectful relationships. And we wanted to evaluate this and undertake research as we went so that we could understand what it takes to make this model work. We did this, and I'm going to share more about our transferable model with you after the following speakers. But first, I'd like to share with you a short video highlighting some of the impacts of generating equality and respect.
I think to finally eliminate violence against women is going to take a whole community approach. I think it's about each individual taking responsibility, and I think obligation sits with all of us.
I think gender equity ideally looks like as close to as possible as a split of everything. So with a new baby, that includes looking after the baby and doing like the everyday things like the feeding or the putting to sleep or the bathing.
The Generating Equality and Respect program has I think really penetrated the community over the last 3 years. When you drive around the city of Monash, you do see banners on sporting grounds, you see banners up on bus stops and buses. People in the community are talking about it.
Bosch Australia is an organisation that's around 700 employees at the Clayton site, predominantly male dominated. That partnership allowed us to change some behaviours, challenge the thinking and set some standards and guidelines and objectives. Monash has certainly opened our eyes as to what some of the real issues are and then how we can actually have an impact internally.
We were really, really lucky in that we were able to access the Monash Partnership in Prevention Programs grant, and what that meant was that we were able to develop a specific junior school program. By the end of the program, one of the things that I really noticed was the boys were talking about it and they were using particular language, but it also gave them permission to not have to live up to particular stereotypes and to be okay with being themselves. That was awesome.
Generating equality and respect enabled Link Health and Community to further its work in prevention of violence against women, to be able to speak that openly and publicly to our clients, to our community members, and share the change and share the message and take that message out to the community along with Monash Council in order to have an impact together. We were able to add value to each other's work and strengthen each other's work.
It's had a massive impact in our community in the last 3 years, and I'm sure it would do the same for any other local government area in Victoria.
Hi, I'm Jane Tawney, the former Program Manager of Generating Equality and Respect based at Monash Council. The program worked across a number of settings with the aim of supporting gender equitable and respectful relationships, organisations and communities. These were a partnership with a male-dominated corporate workplace based in Clayton, Bosch, Australia, influencing organisational change and integrating gender equity into existing training, leadership opportunities and diversity strategies. The establishment of a local Partners in Prevention network that supported youth practitioners to deliver best practice respectful relationships education. The Baby Makes 3 group program delivered to first-time parents in the Clayton Maternal and Child Health Centre. And Monash City Council and Link Health and Community underwent organisational cultural change to embed gender equity through their service delivery, policy, planning and practice. This recognised each organisation's role as a large local employer, as well as an arm of government and a community-based health service. The program team acted as internal change agents in our respective partner organisations, as well as implementing the activities in the other settings in the community. So the reach of generating equality and respect was extensive. We invested in planning, delivered training and awareness raising, influenced policy and organisational development, developed social marketing and communications, implemented direct participation programs, established multiple partnerships and shared our knowledge and learning with others, such as today. So both Monash Council and Link Health and Community saw significant changes. So what did this look like in our organisations? There was increased organisational capacity for primary prevention. Gender equity is now embedded into our structures, policies and practice. There's increased capacity and confidence of staff to promote gender equity and respectful relationships. There's a commitment to an enduring partnership for the prevention of violence against women. And there's a readiness for future opportunities to lead our community in primary prevention. So our evaluation findings highlighted 4 key themes. We'll touch on some of the practice insights for each of those now, but these are detailed more fully in our program's evaluation report. Partnerships were vital for the Generating Equality and Respect program. We found immense benefits of working in partnership, and some of these were unanticipated. The most critical partnership in the program was the cross-organisational partnership between Monash Council, Link Health and Community and Vic Health, which supported effective program planning, implementation and evaluation. There was a cross-organisational program team and an executive committee which comprised of senior leaders from each partner organisation as our key governance structure. The executive committee was collaborative, equal and effective, and it had a culture of learning. In our program evaluation, some executive committee members reflected that there was an opportunity missed for the committee to have a more strategic role in the program. The learning from this is that in order to maximise their effectiveness for long-term sustainability, program governance groups should have a focus on strategic direction in addition to program implementation. participation of senior leaders from all partner organisations, involvement of external members to support program delivery, strategic engagement and two-way communication with the prevention sector, and where relevant, membership of key community stakeholders and organisations. In our partnership with Bosch, we knew that as the organisations leading this work, we needed to walk the talk for primary prevention before we asked other organisations to do the same. We also knew from the experiences of other programs that had worked with corporate workplaces that we needed to start where the organisation was at. This was definitely the case for us in our work with Bosch. We were flexible and responsive in how we partnered with them. Bosch saw itself as part of a larger community effort to prevent violence against women, and we think this was vital to the effectiveness of the partnership. The original program model included a community reference group or board. We decided early on in the program not to go ahead with this group. We think we might have missed an opportunity for building the capacity of key community leaders and stakeholders, and for building community ownership of the program. Given the recent groundswell of community interest in preventing violence against women, we think it's more important now than ever to partner with community structures and key stakeholders, and to harness the growing community momentum to prevent violence against women. Communication was central to the program. We developed a communication strategy to support the quality and consistency of our messages. We also developed a brand and a social marketing campaign with the key message, "Say no to violence against women, say yes to equality and respect," which drew the critical link between violence against women and gender inequality. Just how important communication was became evident as time went on. Many people needed to see visible actions alongside the less visible changes that were taking place. Events, social marketing, e-newsletters and so on were opportunities to engage people and help them understand this link between violence against women and gender inequality. Our communications planning was ongoing, continually seeking different ways to help people make this link, and we learned from the experiences of other practitioners and other programs. It was critical to uphold certain principles in our social marketing and communications. As more people became involved in prevention, we needed to ensure that women's voices remain central, particularly the voices of women who've experienced violence. For example, when men initiate white ribbon activities, these need to incorporate women's voices and women's stories as a core component. We need to work alongside and stay informed by secondary and tertiary prevention efforts. Our communication, as well as our other program activities, sought to positively transform gender relations. Gender-transformative practice aims to challenge and ultimately change the structures, attitudes and behaviours that reinforce gender inequality, and to strengthen those that promote gender equality. It aims to change the way that men and women are viewed and valued, and challenge harmful gender stereotypes. In relation to changing attitudes, work with men to prevent violence against women requires careful consideration and should only be undertaken if it aims to transform gender relations. There's a risk that we could unintentionally reinforce gender inequalities, for example by reinforcing gender stereotypes about women as vulnerable and men as protectors of women. Although some of our activities had a stronger and more explicit focus on gender equity, we never lost sight that the ultimate aim of our work was to prevent violence against women.
Hi, I'm Bronwyn Upston. I was a member of the program team and was based at Link Health and Community. I want to acknowledge Laura Wood, who was also a member of the program team. The program established sustainability structures and systems, embedded gender equity into policy and processes, promoted leadership and strived to create environments where change was possible. A few examples are the gender equity strategy at Monash Council, and at Link Health and Community, a gender checklist for policy development and a Prevention of Violence Against Women committee. Consultation and needs assessment is a great investment. We found that while it is necessary to work with areas of the organisation that were more on board with gender equity, such as the Health Promotion Department or the Community Development Department, it is crucial to invest time and effort in working with those parts of the organisation that were less ready or engaged. But these are important to sustain change across the organisation. Departments such as Human Resources, Organisational Development and Quality Improvement. Sometimes we need to make a judgment call. If there is insufficient capacity or commitment in these core organisational functions to support and sustain action for gender equity, we have to question the effectiveness of our organisational change work. Community health services are well placed to adopt a whole of organisational approach to the prevention of violence against women. Action at all levels makes sense as part of an integrated approach to prevention. Primary prevention of violence against women needs to be seen not just the role of health promotion practitioners, just as secondary prevention or early intervention is not just the role of family violence counsellors. Influencing and educating people to see that primary prevention of violence against women is relevant to their work, in this case the various levels and roles in the health service, and indeed relevant to them personally, needs to run in parallel with making the organisational changes to support gender equity and gender-transformative practice. We need to constantly make the link between gender, health, gender inequality and prevention of violence against women. A core concept was that gender equity is a necessary process to achieve equality. Leadership bridges policy and practice. While we have developed sustainable structures and undertaken considerable capacity development, we have had to acknowledge that we're still early in the journey of sustained change. Embedding gender equity through strategic planning, policy development and quality review systems need the ongoing support of leadership. Without this leadership support, individuals won't have the opportunity to develop the skills and knowledge they need to put a gender equity approach into action and gain the confidence to be advocates for gender equity. We delivered extensive formal training, some existing and some specially designed, as well as informal capacity building in each of the settings we worked in. We used all conversations as opportunities to build people's understanding and awareness of violence against women, its underlying drivers and the role they could play in preventing it. A long-term view and considerable investment in capacity development is fundamental. Increased capacity and understanding of people at all levels of an organisation is supported by and in turn supports structural change of the organisation. The findings of generating equality and respect tell us that training should be seen as a part of a comprehensive ongoing program of learning and structural change. Ideally, it is informed by a needs assessment and reaches all levels of the organisation. Given that resistance is normal in this work, conscious design of our educational approach needs to support changes in attitudes, norms and behaviours. We need to create space for personal reflection, challenging long-held beliefs, and for new information to be integrated. We need to help people move from awareness to action. We found that while people are supportive of the idea of preventing violence against women, our challenge was to motivate and support them to actually take action for gender equality. And this often meant challenging deeply entrenched attitudes and social norms, particularly around gender roles and identity. Rather than a simplistic input and output approach to training, we needed to provide adult learning opportunities in multiple ways. some planned and some opportunistic. This combination of both formal and opportunistic learning contributed to people in each setting having increased knowledge, skills and confidence to prevent violence against women. And this was particularly evident in the 3 organisations undergoing cultural change. To take advantage of opportunistic informal learning, we recommend a skilled prevention workforce and a flexible work plan. It is important to acknowledge that it takes time and practice for all of us, including our leaders, and both women and men, to have the ability and confidence to champion gender equality. When a leader or champion for our cause leaves the organisation, there may be a loss of capacity requiring significant investment to regain. As the evaluation explored, there were a number of tensions in implementing the site-based saturation model of generating equality and respect. We need adequate time for the transition from the necessary inward focus on organisational change activity to initiatives in the community. Change takes time. The program implemented settings-based primary prevention activities that were determined from the outset based on what was known at the time. A lot has happened since then in terms of research evidence and practice wisdom. We have new national organisations and a framework to guide primary prevention of violence against women. Our community is more aware and involved in working together for prevention. By engaging a broader membership of the site's key community stakeholders, a future iteration of generating equality and respect would be more responsive to change in the external environment and the interests and aspirations of the local community. We now have many more evidence-based activities available to implement in more flexible ways within our local community.
And now it's 2016, almost 5 years since the idea for the project started forming. The policy landscape is vastly different. The Victorian Royal Commission into Family Violence has handed down its recommendations and has explicitly highlighted the need for widespread community-led prevention action to overcome what was described as one of the most complex and intractable problems confronting the Victorian community. So what have we gained from generating equality and respect? We now have a model for future site-based primary prevention programs. We have gone beyond implementing prevention activities in single settings and have attempted to pour multiple programs into one location. We now have a model for site-based prevention work that can be considered for place-based work almost anywhere. Of course, in local governments and in community health, but in other places too, universities, suburbs, city precincts. We now have a model that is not only relevant to preventing violence against women, but potentially useful as a health promotion framework more broadly. And we now have a model accessible to any variety of leading partners who are ready to be champions and reach into the community: businesses, education and training providers, sporting associations and community networks. From the outset, we wanted to identify which elements of the model were critical, which elements of the model were non-negotiable, and which were important but potentially flexible. And so here it is. The model on your screens was developed over the life course of the program and illustrates an architecture for planning and implementing site-based primary prevention programs. The inner circle of the model identifies the fixed or core elements of the program that were fundamental to the program. The outer circle identifies what we've called transferable process elements, or design features that we found should ideally be in operation for the site-based framework to really take root. What looks to be a relatively simple diagram has a lot of work sitting underneath it, and we've explained it in greater detail in the Taking a Local Lead resource that you're able to download from the Resource tab beneath the video screen. You'll also find a range of other resources there too, including a toolkit of 6 tools which distill learnings from the 3 leading organisations in carrying out the program in practical, usable formats. The full report provides a comprehensive insight into all of the ins and outs of the program, And in the summary report, you'll find the overarching story of generating equality and respect, including the following recommendations for future practice. A site-based saturation approach should be employed as the basis for future policy, programming and funding in primary prevention. This approach has demonstrated potential to go beyond individual settings and achieve a collective impact in the places that people live, learn, work and play. The processes and infrastructure for prevention at the local level should replicate key features of the Generating Equality and Respect program. The features of the program are consistent with the infrastructure elements outlined in Change the Story, the National Prevention Framework, and they provide a level of direction for implementation at the local level. The transferable model for prevention activity should be used in new investments to ensure an embedded approach to prevention at the local and regional level. And future application of site-based or saturation models should include a focus on testing, attitudes and behaviour change. In this first iteration of Generating Equality and Respect, we wanted to identify the architecture and elements that would allow a site-based approach to work. Future investments could take this to the next step and measure attitudinal and behaviour change over time. So thank you everybody for tuning in today. That brings us to the end of the formal presentations, and I'm now going to pass over to Irene Verens, Manager of the Mental Wellbeing team, to moderate the question and answer session. You'll also see Renee Mbezi, our Principal Program Officer at Vic Health.
Thanks very much, Tessa, and welcome to our wonderful panel of extremely experienced people in the sector and the field of violence prevention. So we've got a couple of questions now that have come in during the webinar, which we've been moderating and will now ask of the panel. Also, if your questions aren't answered, please continue to bring them in so that we can get them answered for the duration of the process. There was a question at the outset around can access to this presentation be available once the webinar is over, and the answer to that is absolutely yes. So please keep asking those questions and you'll be able to access all of the presentation as such. So my first question to the panel, can you talk a little bit about how this program fits in with the broader prevention work? What does it add to the field? What does it point to? Renee?
Oh yeah, I can comment on that. So Vic Health has been working in the prevention of violence against women for around 10 or 15 years. We've been trying to develop research and programs and activities that actually point to what's possible in prevention, because thinking back 10 or 15 years ago, that wasn't clear to the Victorian community. So we started with the Burden of Disease report in 2004, which showed not only did violence have this health impact, which made it relevant for everybody, but that it was preventable and would involve all kinds of sectors and all parts of the community getting on board if we were ever to end violence. Then we went on to look at community attitudes and the role that the beliefs that people hold about violence actually contributes to the problem of violence occurring, and found a pretty strong link there. We then went on to invest in some really specific program development, so looking at what are the tools and resources people can use to do something about this in everyday settings like workplaces and sports settings and schools and local governments. What should people do if they see there's some potential here to prevent violence before it occurs? And this, I suppose, alongside all the work of other partners and other governments in the last few years, the thing about Generating Equality and Respect is that it tries to bring all of that together and create some really tangible models and tools so that the future of prevention is not about one program over there or one initiative over here, but actually brings it all together in one, so we have the best possible community impact. And I think that's the way of the future in prevention.
Thanks, Renee. My next question comes from one of the viewers of the webinar. So Bronwyn, I might just hand over to you on this one. How did you go about getting buy-in from the leadership of the various parties, and how crucial was their role in running the program?
Well, I have to say it's absolutely vital. I think the as far as the program goes, it wouldn't have existed without leadership from both organisations. There was a lot of work done by the leaders in those organisations before Vic Health's funding came along. But certainly from the program team's perspective, it was having an open mind and ensuring that we had access to key decision makers in the organisation. So we were given, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Community Health Service, a lot of access to the board and to, as I said, the leadership. And keeping an open mind and being willing to take on board suggestions. And that's the short answer.
Thanks, Bronwyn. That's good. Jane, I've got a question for you. Can you give us a couple of examples and explain what were some of the challenges and successes of working with men?
Sure, and that's a big and complex question. There was a group that was established that had membership of men from both Monash Council and Link Health and Community, and they were known as the Men's Action Group, and they were a group of male staff who were really committed to preventing violence against women. But I guess they had very different levels of understanding and experiences in what that meant and their understanding of, I guess, what was some of the underlying drivers or key causes of violence against women. So the program team worked very closely with this group of men to really, I guess, build their capacity and their confidence to understand at a really, I guess, nuanced level what those key drivers of violence against women were and how they might play out from a range of kind of, across the spectrum from sexist jokes through to, I guess, the more extreme forms of violence. And we found that it was, that was an incredible opportunity to be able to work with such a group of committed men and really build their skills and confidence. And we had some real impacts on those men's personal and professional lives. So they talked to us about how understanding the issue a bit more really impacted the way that they interacted in their personal lives, particularly with their children, but also in their personal settings. So in conversations that they had with their male friends and their male colleagues as well, but particularly in their personal lives as much as in their professional lives at work. And that was really, I guess, an unexpected impact for us, was how strongly the work of the Generating Equality and Respect program impacted them personally.
That's really interesting, a really important group in this project. Bronwyn, just back to you. Why was the decision made to not include community leaders and stakeholders in the strategic planning of this project, as originally planned through, I think it was having the committee or any other particular structure? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding was that at the executive program group decided not to go ahead with having a community-based board or reference group, was because it was recognised that the type of activities that we were doing were with very diverse groups, and that we needed to develop individual relationships with the different stakeholders, and that it might not be a good use of their time to bring them together for making decisions about things that maybe weren't relevant to what they were involved with in the program. So that was my understanding what the decision was made at the time, and it didn't affect in any way the implementation of the strategies that we made in the program, but I think it's been reflected in some of the findings that possibly we would have looked at how we could have included more community stakeholders in decision making, maybe in a different way than what we'd originally thought. But because the model was the way it was set up, and that's how we were going to do it, that was how we originally were going to do it. So
okay,
changed, yeah.
Thanks, Bronwyn.
Irene?
Sure.
Just want to pick up on the point about relationships that you made, because I think it's key, is that we understood that we were going to have an enormous job on our hands building relationships with the 5 settings in which we were going to implement programs, and that was community engagement. And if we were to then add another community, I suppose, network to that, which we would have to form a relationship with, the project team would have to service, they'd need to get to know each other. It was almost adding another layer, and your point about is that really worth their time is a really important one, because we knew that it wasn't going to feed back directly into the implementation. So it was about making sure that we set up the most strategic relationships with the limited time that we have, and I think that was achieved.
Now, it has been a challenging project, and another question that's just come in has been around resistance. So Renee, just following on, what were some of the examples of resistance that were encountered by the project overall? I think I might ask this question of a number of the project people, just to get your differing views on it. So Renee, do you want to go first?
Yeah, look, there are a whole range of sources of resistance, and we probably all have individual and experiences and ones we brought to the table as sort of project team problems to solve. But I guess picking up on your comments earlier about working with men, what stands out for me about this project is that in particular where there was resistance or questions or pushback from men in particular, what was great about this project and allowed us to respond to that resistance effectively is, first of all, that we weren't asking them to be activists. So we weren't asking them to put their neck out or do anything differently or stand out from the crowd too much for the wrong reasons, but actually asking them, showing them that gender equality can be part of their job. And then that means we can refer you to an expert project team member who can help you think about, what is my job as a HR manager rather than as a man in this project, and I think that was critical. Another thing that helped us when there was resistance to people thinking, why should I be the one to put my hand up? Why this is a really difficult issue? Is it really my role? Is the strong message from both Link Health and the council that said, we've got your back. You're not going to be doing this alone. We're all in this together. This is really serious for our CEOs and our mayors and our councillors and everybody in between. You're not going to be the only one doing this, and you'll be supported. So that, I observed, helped people to come to a place, okay, I'm part of a team, I'll get on the boat, and if it all falls flat, that's not going to be on my back. We're all in this together. That helped a lot.
Great. Bronwyn, do you want to make a comment?
I just think giving people space to have that resistance, and as I mentioned before, that it's normal part of the work, and sort of having different ways of coming around that rather than hitting it head on all the time. You don't need to do that. And having multiple opportunities to engage with people, using very good evidence, I think helps give people, they can take that away and think it through. And if you give them different ways of engaging with the work, they'll come at it from whichever place that they feel comfortable.
Sure. Okay. I'm just going to skip on to the next set of questions because they are coming in quite rapidly now. So just in terms of time, Tessa, do you want to talk a little bit about the actual program that was delivered in the corporate setting in the workplace? How was it introduced, and what was the interest and the uptake?
Sure. I think that might actually be a better question for Bronwyn or Jane to answer.
Either one of you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Bosch were interested pretty much from the word go. It took a while to get that relationship up and running because there's a whole lot of formal processes that have to happen and relationship building. They were very interested in their corporate responsibility. They were very interested in their safety of their staff. They were very interested in not just what they looked like, but actually making sure that they were involved in their community. I think they actually were interested in the whole concept of the fact that they're part of something bigger. But at the end of the day, they had already existing interest in diversity, and so that was one of the key intersecting points with them. And they'll be taking that forward, and gender's on their agenda. That's their key.
And what were a couple of the activities that were undertaken as part of the program within Bosch?
Okay, within Bosch we did some worksite-based activities which involved awareness raising with men and women. We did men's and women's health seminars which were framed around health, but our agenda was around prevention of violence. We looked at integrating into their workplace behaviours training, having module around the prevention of violence against women and why we need to think of it in terms of the workplace and what my role is as a worker or as a manager in dealing with that. We had White Ribbon Day activities. We didn't run all of these things directly. We supported them. Jane, you might want to talk a bit more about all the information and resourcing that you provided.
So I guess a critical part of our work with Bosch was really building the capacity of a manager within the human resources team there, and really building her capacity and her confidence to drive and champion this work going forward, and throughout the program period as well. So Bronwyn and I met with the key champion within Bosch very frequently. We provided her lots of information, the most recent research and evidence. So she now has a huge amount of capacity and confidence and is really driving gender equity through all of the work that she did. And we also delivered some unconscious bias training to their senior managers as well.
So there was sort of leadership buy-in, there was capacity building and training, awareness raising more generally. So they're the three major components within a workplace setting.
And they're off and running. They've got plans in place for this year and next year, etc. So
great. Okay, I might just turn to Tessa now. Someone wants to know where to from here. Has capacity been built to a sufficient level in the partner organisations and the community? How will this be maintained? So where to from here is probably the one for Tessa.
I think, as I mentioned in the presentation, the partnership and the extent of organisational work that's gone on within the two lead organisations, the two lead partners in particular, means that the site and local area that Generating Equality and Respect was taken within is absolutely ready and off and running with gender equity activities. So particularly so in the two lead organisations, but also in all of the other networks and organisations that we activated for gender equity within the community.
Renee, would you like to, where to from here?
I was just thinking about what you said earlier, Tessa, in your presentation about how the elements of the model that we've come up with through Generating Equality and Respect really mirror the, I guess, infrastructure bit of the Change the Story national framework. And that's, for me, that's one of the most exciting things, is that it says, well, here's this quite theoretical framework that paints a picture of where we might go with prevention, and then that together with the model that Generating Equality and Respect has developed says, here's how. Yeah. So we hope, and as you talked about, it's a model that can be applied in local governments, universities, suburbs, city precincts, so that there's the best possible community impact.
And so from a location, place-based approach, where to from here for the Monash crew?
Yeah. Well, from what I hear from Link Health and Community, there's a strong commitment to go forward. Our CEO made quite a strong statement about that, and there'll be continued partnership between the two organisations. We'll be looking at, Link Health and Community will be looking at how it works with schools in its health promotion work, and also in its work with culturally diverse communities.
And I guess from Monash Council's perspective, in the final year of the Generating Equality and Respect program, a 5-year gender equity strategy was developed. So Council's made some really strong commitments to gender equity through that 5-year strategy, and also through the strong commitment of its executive leadership and its elected councillors as well. So we're really excited about the opportunities to promote this work further into our community and build on our partnership with Link Health and Community.
Thanks everyone. It's been a great project and we hope you enjoy the webinar.